Hello and welcome to the Nix Hour. Let's start. But before that, I want to announce the new time for August. So actually, next week there won't be a Nix Hour, and instead the next one will be on August the 9th. So we switched the time to, well, same time, but on Fridays, starting August 9th. So we have a new time every month, and you can see the previous one. Well, it doesn't really matter, the previous ones really. But yeah, we have a new one every month, so different people can attend. And also before we jump into the topic, I briefly want to just say something kind of unrelated, just a nice announcement that we published yesterday. So the formatting team recently worked to have an enforced formatting for Nix packages. So we have an official formatter now that's Nix FMT, but it's different from the original Nix FMT, so it differs significantly. But yeah, that's being enforced for new files and for changed files that were already formatted before. So in the next weeks, hopefully, we can also make a tree-wide reformatting so that over time it gets enforced for more and more files. And so yeah, hopefully that will limit the format bike shedding in Nix packages a bit. So that's that. And so then let's jump into the topic for today. And that is, originally was Nix's kernel overriding, but let's talk about just tricky package overrides in general, and let's see where we can go. So I want to look into this specifically. So let's jump in. So this one is about a VirtualBox unstable, and so it's an override in here, nixpackages.config. So this is in a NixOS configuration, and we're specifically looking at if we go into main configuration.nix, if we search for nixpackages.config, it is this option here, global configuration for Nix packages. We have a question briefly about the Nix hour, whether past Nix hours happen to increment more from simple to more advanced. The Nix hour is kind of all over the place. If we get simple questions, we'll talk about simple things. If you want, so if you want to ask something, you can open an issue in the Nix hour issue tracker. It doesn't matter if it has been covered before, although we might link you to the previous episode then. But yeah, if you have any simple questions, beginner questions, very welcome. That's for me, it's also the easiest to talk about. But yeah, we also cover sometimes a bit more trickier topics like this one. So yeah, feel free to ask simple questions as well. And today you can also ask simple questions in the chat that are somewhat related to the issue at hand. So like package overrides, and feel free to ask anything about package overrides in the chat right now. So I've seen this here, so nixpackages.config, and allow unfree. I guess that should be allow unfree. So actually, if we try this out, it's a bit unfortunate that this doesn't get type checked. And so, well, it does get type checked, but only kind of very loosely. So if we try this out, so let's go into the Nix hour repo, the code I should commit later. We have 81. I'll just create a simple default.nix, and maybe we get packages in all sorts of different ways in various Nix hour episodes. Today I'll just get it from like here, I guess. So I'll just copy the hash and do like a fetch tarball URL equals, and then it's this here. I think you can also get that from the clone button somewhere. But yeah, it's archive / the commit hash / tar.gz. And then the hash, I'll leave that empty for now. And there's also, you can use flakes, you can use npins, you can use niv, you can use there's probably a couple other ways that I'm missing right now. So this is, I'll call this next packages, then I'll define packages as import next packages, and then we can set the config here. We'll set this in a bit, but for now I'll just leave this empty, and I'll also set overlays to empty. Otherwise it reads overlays from our home config. Not the case for Flakes, but I like doing it like this. And then system, I'll do inherit system, and then I think a good pattern, and we have like templates for this as well, but I think this is a good template. So this allows us to set the system if we want. That's very useful for pure evaluation, but also it works by default for impure evaluation and the stable Nix commands. So for now, let's do like a just packages dot. So what is exactly being evaluated here? We have, oh, I guess it's a NixOS configuration. Is this an ISO image build? VirtualBox guest additions. Let's see, we might want to, let's see. It would always be good if you have a trouble and need some help with that to make it as reproducible as possible. So ideally also like if the command you're using to test this, yeah. Anyways, in this case, well, let's just do, I don't know, let's do something simple just to make sure it works. So Nix Hour code 81. So we have this default.nix now, and we should just be able to do a Nix build in here. Found empty hash, so let's wait for a second until it gets that done. We have some, perhaps like better question is, what would be a good primer to better prepare for this level of content? I feel like there's a bunch of Nix hours that are a bit simpler, but also what would be interesting if you have like maybe watch some Nix hours and just see what kind of things you're not understanding, and you can make a single issue in the Nix hour repository just listing a bunch of these. Like that would actually be really helpful because for me as someone that has been using Nix for a while longer, it's almost impossible to know what beginners struggle with. And so I really need to like look into like help forums and chats and so on to see what people are asking for. And so if you struggle with something, feel free to ask about it. Just list it out, see what kind of things you run into, what problems you encounter, and then we could cover those. And that could be the preparation for Nix Hour could be the Nix Hour we do as a preparation for others. But yeah, it's a lot of different things you might want to learn. But yeah. Okay, hashes. So, I mean, I can also explain things a bit along here as we go. So also here, so, well, I guess Nix language basics would be a good requirement. But in this case, well, I'm not sure how much we can go into that. But yeah, we have functions. We call those with attributes, with an attribute set here. That's kind of like a JSON thing. And we don't always need this hash, but for purity, it is nice. So actually in here, this would also work. So if I try building this, it takes a bit longer actually to evaluate because it needs to re-download this. But this works as well, and it gives you the exact same result. But because this is a URL, and this GitHub URL could just randomly change, because of that, we need to actually provide a hash for Nix to know that, oh, this is never changing. So actually, if we don't provide a hash and try to run this with pure evaluation mode, and there is pure eval in the old CLI, but it doesn't work quite like that. So you need to actually do something a bit messy here. Let's see, could we actually, this is a bit too messy. So We could do flakes instead, and that's the kind of the main way people use pure evaluation mode. Outside of that, it doesn't matter that much, but I prefer it here because of the speed. Because if I do this, it's kind of much faster because Nix already kind of knows where exactly this path has to go. And we can also see this here. So if we do just output Nix packages, so this is entirely ignored. So we just have a variable definition and use it right away. And do not a Nix build. We can't do a Nix build because it's not a derivation. Nix build actually underneath, it does there's kind of two steps in derivation generation. The first one is Nix instantiate, and this one already fails. So this essentially evaluates the Nix code and turns it into a build recipe. That's a derivation. But even that already fails because it's not a derivation. Instead, we can use Nix instantiate eval. And so that's okay. That turns into lambda, and it's also a bit of a weird thing. But if you just evaluate this is of course there's a function here. These are function arguments, or this is a single function argument, and this is the return value. So yes, it turns into a lambda. That's a function. But we can also, there's some auto calling involved sometimes. So we saw earlier that Nix build without. This is getting a bit. We're seeing all the quirks in Nix right now. But yeah, if you just do Nix build, there's some auto calling going on because a lambda, a function, is not actually a derivation, but still it can actually build it. And so it does, like if you have these default arguments, this is a default argument, it can call these functions automatically for the CLI. So if I remove this, for example, then it can't do it anymore. Yes, and then it complains. Then we'd have to provide it manually with -arg or -arg string. Anyways, so we have, I just briefly wanted to show this here. So Nix packages, and what is this actually? Maybe a better way to explore this is Nix REPL. So enter Nix REPL, and now I want to inspect this file. And so how do we do that? We can say f equals import this file. So this is default.nix. Now f is the value of that file, and we can also see here that's a lambda. But now we can actually call it, and we don't need to provide an argument here. Because there is a default, so we just call it with an empty attribute set. And now we get this back. So this is actually a string, and it's not a derivation. Whereas if we change this to packages.hello, and well, if we just rerun this, it won't change. We need to do :r. That reloads all the files. And oh yeah, we also need to redefine f. But yeah, this turn is a derivation then. And actually, the REPL is also a bit deceiving here. Like, what is actually derivation? We can kind of see the more internals by avoiding Nix REPL pre-printing it in this way. If we just set the type to something else, something that is not derivation. So this is what the normal type is. But if we set it to an empty string, we can see what it actually is. And it's a whole bunch of attributes, but there's some important ones. There's like, where is it? Name is important. Outpath is important. That's where the build generates the final output. Yeah, anyways, we're going a bit in depth here. Let's see, I'll briefly read the comments. I've been using it on 3 machines with 3 users and really like it. Nice. That's where Nix really shines, sharing configuration. Yeah. Yes, but so today we want to, let's go back to this one here. So, and specifically we have this virtual box in here. And actually for that, we wouldn't want to build hello then, but virtual box instead. Virtual box. So this is the standard package set, and if we do that, let's see, can we build a virtual box? Hopefully it's pre-cached. It might actually, probably doesn't take too long to build. It might be like a wrapper derivation, which doesn't need to actually do very much. Okay, so this we can ignore for now. I think the more important one is the VirtualBox guest additions. And for this, so well, actually something I don't want to ignore is this here, package overrides. So it's actually, I think it's used a lot throughout the documentation, but this is actually kind of outdated. And the newer way of doing this, so actually let's verify that this actually works first. Or I'm actually not sure how well this is going to work. But yeah, let's say VirtualBox guest additions. Let's just copy this, although it is commented out. Not sure why exactly. So VirtualBox guest additions, and for this, maybe let's just set it to the. Well, I guess here's the problem then. So we want to override it with something, but what is actually the old value? And in this case, I think it's packages, but it's not like super clear. But we'll try it in this case. So I'll just do something like very simple, and maybe how about this? We do an override attributes. This is a way to override the derivation attributes, so we can change the build recipe more or less directly. So these are the old. So override attributes takes a function which gets the old arguments as an argument, the old attributes as an argument. Now we can provide new ones, and it will override them like that. So something simple we can do here is to set the name to something different. So we'll just do this. So old.name. So we maintain the old name, but then we add a suffix, and that will be modified. All right. And now let's try this again. Now, hopefully this will change. And actually, before we do that, hold on. Let's comment this out for now. And we're going to use Nix instantiate here. So Nix instantiate evaluates the entire Nix language thing. And this, we end up just with the build recipe for this derivation. So if this here has an effect, the build recipe should already change here. And we don't even need to build it to notice that something changed, because the hash should be different. So let's try this. And it doesn't. It's the same thing. So we already know that this won't affect anything. Actually, if we try to build that now, it will just use the already built thing from before, because these derivations know exactly where they need to end up with, and that's right here. We can also inspect this with nix-door-q outputs, I believe. Oh yeah. Or there's also, I think, is there bindings? Maybe not. Oh well, let's query binding. All right, so we can do binding out path, or is it just out? Oh, it's just out. Okay. Oh, and there's also outputs, so you can have multiple outputs, and in this case we have two, but the default one is the first one, so that would be out in this case. So that. Anyway, so yeah, the build recipe knows where it's going to end up with, but it doesn't change in our case, so we know the override doesn't have any effect. And so then what the next step is to look into the source code to see, like, how does VirtualBox and VirtualBox guest additions relate to each other? Did I make a typo here maybe? Should it be this? Well, is that even the right thing? Does packages.virtualbox guest additions even exist? Actually, let's try this out first, because we can also build that and like independently of VirtualBox. So I think I'll actually not specify VirtualBox here specifically, such that I can do nix instantiate -a and then select the attribute from packages that I want from the CLI. So like I could do this here, the same thing from before, VirtualBox. This gives us the exact same thing, but I can also then specify guest additions. And now here we should see a change, so I'll comment this out again. VirtualBox guest additions, and this actually doesn't exist. So packages.virtualbox guest additions doesn't exist. So like also if we override it, we would have gotten the same thing, right? Attribute missing. So I think that calls for looking into the source code, how they need to be connected. There's also some more peers here and more discussions where we could also figure something out. But okay, let's look at the source code and try to figure it out ourselves. So I'll go into Nix packages here. So this is just Nix packages clone. And by the way, if you don't even need to clone Nix packages to have a copy of it available. Like if you install stuff from Nix packages, you have it available, and that comes with a default installation of Nix. And so you can also get a path to that using Nix instantiate find file Nix packages. So in my case, this points here. If you use channels, I wouldn't recommend using channels, but if you use them, then it points somewhere else. And if you use flakes, it also points somewhere else. But yeah, this is a very generic way of finding a Nix packages clone. So in my case, I could go in here and there's a Nix packages in here that I can use to look at. And maybe a really brief plug, I have a kind of fairly simple tutorial for how to not use channels for NixOS, but also not using flakes. I'm just using a NIF in this case, but you can also use endpins. It's a fairly simple way to get this done. So that would be Xenix. I'll leave this here for a sec. Anyways, so let's look at the source. So you also need to make sure it is the right version, I suppose. Let's actually make this sure. So I picked the latest master commit here. So I will also check this out here. And so this is something you couldn't do with just the Nix instantiate find file location, because that usually isn't a Git directory. So for that, you would need a clone. So we don't have this revision right now, so I need to pull from master. And actually, I'll do a fetch upstream to fetch all the revisions from master. Okay, and now I should be able to switch to this, and I'll need a detach here. Okay, so VirtualBox now. Now, how can we find where the VirtualBox is defined? And for that, I'm going to use the REPL, and I load Nix packages into the REPL right away using -f dot. And so we have VirtualBox in here. That should be the derivation, the same one from before. The N1 thing, yes, we can compare these hashes. Well, the first couple characters are usually enough. Yeah, like you could also end up with ones that are like almost the same, or with way more characters being the same. We have a question. So you use a method in Nix that doesn't use channels or flakes, or did that comment apply only to this content, to this context? Yes, I use it applies overall. I don't use channels and I don't use flakes for almost everything. And actually here, this example we just wrote is also a way of not using channels and not using flakes, because I just fetched Nix packages. I just pinned it like this. And in Xenix here, or using NIF or npins, or there's other ways, it's really just taking this and putting it in a JSON file and then importing from that JSON file instead of having it in line with the code. So this allows you then to way more easily update it. So you can have tooling, and that's what NIF then does, to just update these hashes and these URLs instead of having to manually do it. So yeah, that's my kind of preferred way of doing things. And Flakes is, by the way, very similar. Like Flakes also just has a log file for this instead, and imports it by itself. But okay, so we have VirtualBox in here. I want to get to the location, and sometimes we can use meta.position for this. This is something that gets kind of implicitly added to most attributes and packages. And here we get this path back out, and that seems to be pretty accurate to me. So, and let's open this here on this other window. It specifically points to line 275, and if we go there, we should see why. 275. We can see description here. Well, it's not obvious from this, but where this comes from is because underneath it does something like this. built-ins.unsafe get attripos. So this is a built-in, and it's unsafe because it does something impure. And so specifically, it allows you to get the location of attributes. So in this case, it specifically got the location of this one. So that would look like this. We get the location of the description of virtualbox.meta. So then we get this back, and here is the line 275. And that's impure because if I do this, or impure or not referentially transparent would be another way to word it. If I change this here, reload the files, and try this again, then we get 276. So even though it's the exact same expression, you get a different result. That's the definition of impurity pretty much. And so that's why it's unsafe and shouldn't generally be used in like actual code. It's way more useful and is okay to use for like debugging and error location information and stuff like that. Oh yeah, the next edit thing. Yes, let's actually use that as well. Yeah, in the new and still experimental CLI, there's the Nix edit, which allows you to do. Actually, is this going to be very slow? It is going to be very slow. And does it actually open the... okay, I guess that doesn't quite work. Does this work? VirtualBox. I think this should work better, hopefully. It still copies... Like, hold on. Oh, what if we... this seems to work. Yeah. Although it seems to like copy things around, which I'm not a big fan because Nix packages is really big, and but I don't think this should. Probably. Okay. Anyways. Oh yeah, and actually this might work if we do. Oh no, I'm actually not sure. Anyway, so we have the location. It is right here. And so let's see if we can find any guest edition stuff in here. And I can see something right here. And that's also the ISO thing. I didn't really know how the ISO, how something about ISO was related to the original ticket here, but we can see it here now. So VirtualBox guest editions ISO, let's see. Let's make this a bit bigger. Okay, so something to watch out for is these arguments up here. And so this is the package kind of meta recipe in a way. So this returns an actual package, like something you can build, a build recipe. That's down here, that's the derivation. Derivations are these build recipes. But up here, you have arguments for that. And you need to provide these arguments to get the build recipe out of here. So the question is, what arguments are provided? And also, these ones here can be customized to something different. And you can override these. So, well, by default, they get all provided from the packages directly. So, for example, stdn up here comes directly from, so we loaded packages here, that comes directly from packages.stdn. So that's provided in this argument. Fetch URL comes from fetch URL and so on. But these ones here don't usually come from Nix packages. So if you have Java bindings, that doesn't exist. but there's a default, so it uses that default instead. But you can also override these. So if you take VirtualBox, you can use .override, and that's kind of one of the, I'd say, most useful, most commonly used override functions. You can do this and, for example, say, well, we want to change the Java bindings to be false instead. So we don't want to build it with Java bindings, would be the meaning of that. So Java bindings equals false. And now we should get a different hash, and indeed we do. It's not the, well, previously it was this one, but now it's this one. So it actually changed something about the derivation. This also works for, this works for all of these arguments, also the ones that are provided by default and don't have a default. Well, a lot of defaults in here. But for example, we could say stdnv. Overwrite this to stdnv no cc. I'm not sure if that would actually work. Yeah, I guess it doesn't work. But yeah, that could also be overridden. But yeah, so something I don't see here is VirtualBox guest additions. There's some guest stuff here, but yeah, guest additions is only comes from down here. So VirtualBox guest additions ISO. So it uses call package here. It's a call package that actually fills in these arguments. This file itself, the VirtualBox/default.mix, is also called with a call package from somewhere else. And that's how these arguments get filled. And so in this case, we have another file. We have guest additions ISO, which also looks kind of like this. So if you go in here, it's much simpler. And oh, this is actually just fetches something. It's not even a real derivation build. Okay, but then the question becomes, how do we change this? And that's actually might be kind of tricky, but I mean, that's what the episode is about, right? So how do we change this? Because it's not in the override arguments up here. It's just down here in this let-in statements. And that's why many people are saying that let-in statements are kind of bad because you can't override anything in them. And so I see two ways, or actually three ways we could change this. And so yeah, let's look at those. So one of them is to see where this is used. So the let-in statement, like we can do foo equals 10 in here, and it wouldn't be used, and then it wouldn't also matter. But where is this actually used? So let's go down here, VirtualBox guest additions. Let me go down here. Here. So, well, actually, no, this is not where it's used. Here it is used, VirtualBox guest additions ISO. And so this is apparently an attribute passed to make derivation. And that means we can use the same thing we did earlier with the override address and VirtualBox guest additions. Yeah, we can use the override address for that. So we have .override, which overrides these arguments up here, but we also have .override address, which overrides the attributes down here that are passed to the derivation. Yeah, so let's try this out. Let me exit here, and I'm going to change this up here and say, let's just write it down here. So we have VirtualBox equals, and now we take the old one, although it's actually package overrides isn't that great to use. We're going to change that hopefully in a second. So VirtualBox and then .override address. So we want to change the VirtualBox guest additions ISO attribute. Okay, and so how do we, well, we have the old value here, I suppose, this one. And then let's try the same thing. Let's do the same thing as up here. And do it like this. All right, so there's a bunch of old variables in here. Let's make them a bit more distinguished. Okay, and that should, in theory, work. Let's try it out. So Nix Hour code 81. Let me actually move around some things a bit. So we have the VirtualBox code down here. We have our Nix code file up here. And let me make this like this so we can see the entire thing. Okay, now let's build a virtual, or actually let's just do Nix instantiate -a VirtualBox. VirtualBox. And we can see a different hash now. So let's actually just also verify this. If we comment this out, it is the old hash. And so actually that did actually change something. That's good. So let's also see what actually changed. So a kind of useful utility for that is nix-diff, nix-diff. So let me actually get the attributes, the derivations again. Comment this out. All right, we have these two. So these are already build recipes. Whatever we do with these paths, well, whatever we do in this next file won't affect the contents of these paths anymore. So we can do a nix-diff of these two to see what changed. And let's make this a bit bigger. And let's scroll up here. So we can see the set of input derivation names do not match. So there's different inputs for this derivation. So one of them is modified. That's exactly what we expect to see. And also down here, this is a bit harder to read, but it's the same thing with -modified at the end. All right, so that makes sense, and same here. So that looks pretty good. Let's try building it as well. So let me uncomment this again. Let's build -a VirtualBox. And let's see how long this actually takes. I hope it doesn't need to compile anything. Oh, but it looks like it might need to compile something because it's downloading a lot of dependencies. Yes. Yeah, this is actually a lot. Okay, hold on. What we can do to kind of see how long something takes to build, we can go to Hydra. That's the build farm that builds everything in Nix packages, or almost everything. So Hydra has different projects. In our case, we want the Nix packages one. All right, takes a second to load. All right, and then there's different job sets. These are kind of different. Well, they have different branches they track and different inputs and different configurations. In our case, we want the trunk one. That's kind of the good default that's built from the master playground, from the master branch. And so we can go in here, jobs, and find the VirtualBox one. VirtualBox. All right, it's a bit slow because there's 240,000 jobs. That's understandable. Shouldn't take much longer though. Here we go. There's a lot of cases though, but yeah, down here we have it. So I'm on x86-64 Linux. Here's the VirtualBox derivation. We can go to like any of these. These are successful builds. If something fails, we'd see a red cross. So I'll just click to the latest one here. And then we can see here, duration 8 minutes, 56 seconds. So that's maybe a bit too long. I'm not sure if I want to wait for that. And yeah, we can see here it starts compiling. But okay, so in theory that should work. We didn't actually change much for now, but yeah. Okay, let's go back to here. Oh, and actually I wanted to do the package overrides thing. So that's a bit outdated. Instead, the newer thing to do is to use overlays. And so we can see it here. That's another argument to packages. And so in here, overlays is a list of overlays. Each of them is a function that takes 2 arguments. And the first one is, we call that final. The second one, we call that prev. and it returns an attribute set. So in here, the cool thing is that you get access to both the previous thing, the thing that you want to override. So in this case, that would be VirtualBox guest editions, but you can also get access to the, wait, flipped it around. So the previous one that's here, that's the kind of previous versions before these changes are being made, but you can also get access to the final changes. So if you have like, and I'm not sure how well we can demonstrate this here, but well, let's just convert it to the overlay for now. So, and actually I'll delete this one. We don't really need that apparently. So I'll just move this one in down here. And instead of packages here, it's prev. I mean, we could have also called this argument prev. I think that's what it is. But yeah, prev is kind of the common convention. And so then we can remove this package overrides. Overlays is like strictly more powerful than package overrides. I'm like 99% sure at least. We keep the config as empty so it doesn't read stuff from impure locations. And yeah, let's try this again. It should be exactly the same thing. Instantiate VirtualBox. That, I think if I remember correctly, that's the same hash as before, yes. And maybe also something here. So Nix build is just Nix instantiate followed by a Nix store dash realize effectively. And so in this case, we did a Nix instantiate already. So another way of then building this derivation, which then actually doesn't need to evaluate any Nix code anymore. So like we could also just do like some random syntax errors in here, but we can still run the second step here of Nix store realize of that derivation. So yeah, that works because at this point, everything we specified in this Nix file is already represented in our derivation here. And it's a pure path. We can't modify this anymore. Yeah, so that's another way of just building things and understanding it a bit. Qt base is never a good sign for the build time. Maybe leave package overrides commented out for posterity. Yeah, I guess we can do that. Let's do it like this. Use overlays instead. Okay, so we have that. Now, something I want to, oh yeah, we wanted to cover other ways of overriding things. So this is one way. And so what would be another way? One other way is like super hacky, but it works in kind of more cases. And so we need to look at how this is called. So call package is used here, and we can't override this one, but could we override individual parts from here? And specifically here, call package, can we override this? So I'm going to try this. Let's comment this out. Let's copy this one over here, kind of like this. So yeah, where does call package come from? Well, call package it's up here in these arguments, and we can override these. So that kind of works. But then we also need to watch out, is call package used in other places? Because this gets into the kind of slightly hacky business. So let's see, where's call package all used? So it's used for guest editions. It's only used for guest editions. So that will kind of work somewhat easily, but it's of course like very, very hacky because as soon as you use call package for something else, it's going to break. But yeah, it's in case of emergency, this would also work in theory. So we can do this. We can say call package is old.call package, but actually it's a function. So and it takes 2 arguments. So we have a file, we have let's call this A, and we call this with file and A. So this should be exactly the same thing still. So let's just try this. Next, instantiate this. Can a cursor function to a string? What did I mess up here? Lambda call package. Line 20. call package. Oh, I'm using override address here. So yeah, these arguments need override, not override address. All right, let's try this again. And that works. And we can still see our old N1JJ hash here. It didn't change anything yet. But now we kind of know, and we can actually do also like a trace in here. Let's do one here, yeah. So built-ins.trace, and we can say call package on F. And I'm going to do toString here so we don't copy the file. Actually, let's see what happens if we don't do this. So let's just instantiate this. And we can see here, trace, call package on this file. But so the reason why we want to use toString here is because there's no need to import this file into the Nix store. And so if you don't do this, it's gonna, well, if you use toString, it's going to trace this one, which, well, it's already in the Nix store. And so actually, this was kind of the second import of it into the Nix store. But actually, this is kind of surprising me right now. Why is this already in the Nix? Oh, no, that makes sense. That does make sense because we fetched this, and this itself returns Nix package in the Nix store path. All right, so we have call package, and it only gets called on this guest editions ISO thing. And we also have the result of that here, notably. So we have, let's do this here. So we have result equals this in result. And so we can also say built-ins.trace result is this one here. And so in this case, this is a derivation. It's not a path. So we don't need to do any toString thing. And if we try this, we can see the result is this VBox guest editions ISO thing. So now we can also just override this. Like we can take this result here and do an override address on this. And here we can do the exact same thing. Name, let's change the name like this. And old, I guess let's do this here. Old prime as well. And let's try. All right, we can see the result changed. We can also see the final derivation here changed. All right, so this is actually very hacky. Let me put this just in bold. Hacky, but it works. Yeah, and so maybe like, okay, this is a bit dangerous because we don't really like, if this derivation gets changed, if this file gets changed to suddenly also use like something else, like what if we have, I don't know, well, I don't know, hello equals hello dot override address, or actually call package hello, then this would be problematic because we'd also override this hello thing with something else. So what we can do is to do an assert or do an if condition here. And say something like this, where we say, let's do original result. Hold on, vim gripes. So this original. All right, and then we change this to original. Or actually, the result should then be if the original dot name, or let's say p name equals something. What was it here? VBox guest editions 7 ISO that thing. Actually, I'm not sure if there's a version even here. So let's just check for name. If it is this, then do the override. If it is not, then don't do the extra override. I mean, it's hacky, but if you need to use it, this does work. So let's try it out. So Nix instantiate, this should give us the QAW, yes, and if we did something else, it would give us something different. But here we also have version numbers in here, which isn't that great. So we could also do like a we could do lib.match on with like a regex. This I mean we're already here. Might as well go all the way, right? So that's something like I mean maybe just do. Okay, maybe let's not use regex. Let's just use lib.has prefix. And that's kind of easier a bit. So has prefix vbox guest additions. Yeah, why not? Old original.name. And we need lib in here. Oh, and this is actually interesting. So where do you get lib from in overlays? That would, well, we don't override lib in our case, so we get it from final. So final.lib. If you were to override lib, you would need to use pref instead. So let's say we do lib equals pref.lib, or actually let's try final here. So final.lib.extend, that's a way to extend lib itself with an overlay. So kind of recursive overlays here, or nested overlays rather. So let's say we want to add our own function here. Let's say foo equals 10. And we can do that. So if we now do like nix instantiate eval-a lib.foo, that, oh yeah, that actually doesn't work. So because we are overriding lib here, we need to use pref here instead. So anything you override in an overlay should come from pref. So we override lib here, should come from pref. Anything you don't override should come from final. So this here does work. All right, we have 10 in our own lib now. But also there's this rare case where you need to compute the list of attributes right like kind of earlier here. So like for example, we want to trace all attributes that we are setting in this overlay. We might want to do that with a lib.map address here, and like say name value, and then like built-ins.trace name. And we can actually we can reduce this to just that. So where should lib come from here? So we don't override it. We don't override map address or lib at this location. So we might try final.lib, but this will fail. Infinite recursion, and that's a bit of a like overlays need to know the attributes themselves before it can kind of use the overlay. So in this case, there we need to use pref, just because there's no other way of doing it. And so yeah, that then works. Let me put this like maybe here, and actually I'm gonna format this file. All right. So we have that. Okay. Now, I was mentioning another way of overriding something, and let's try that. So what we could imagine doing is to actually override this file itself with something different. So make a patch for this file and then apply to Nix packages and kind of use it that way. So let's try this. So I'm going to go to this file, and we're in Git here, so we can kind of right away modify it. So let's say the name, we want to change the name. So let's do this here and say, right, we're going to do the same modification, modified. All right, and now let's generate a diff for that. So I'm going to do git diff. And well, there's also that, but we're only interested about this. So let's actually let me do a checkout -p so we can say remove this change. So yes to that, no to this one. Okay, git diff again. Now we have exactly what we want. Now I'm gonna output that diff to Nix Hour code 81. And that's my, let's call it vbox dot patch. Sure. All right, we now have in our directory here, we have v.box.patch. So that's diff here. All right, now we need to apply it. And actually, let me comment this out before we go ahead. All right, so we have our original Nix packages up here. Let's call that original. But now we're going to define a new one. Nix packages equals. Actually, it's a bit annoying because we need to import a function to even patch the thing. So we let's do it like this. Packages original equals import Nix packages. And here we do kind of the very simple import, just this overlays equals that. And then inherit system. So we just use this to get a patching function. And so what we can do is packages original and say, well, how do we apply the patch? We can use make derivation. That has the patches array, the patches attribute that we can use. So stdinf.make derivation. Then we say we need to give a name. So we say Nix packages patched. Oh, actually, there's well, I guess let me use this, but there's a better way of doing this. Well, let me use a better way right away. There's source only, which doesn't need any like build phases or anything like that, and it works for patching things. So we can do the source. In our case, that's going to be our Nix packages original. All right, and then we can use patches to say apply this vbox.patch to that Nix packages. And so yeah, now packages is just importing Nix packages here. With our overlays, although in this case we don't need the overlays anymore, we just do the lib thing. And it should still give the correct hash that we expect. So let's try this out. And actually, if we do this now, it will require infinite recursion. Oh, Nix package original should be here, original. All right. So yeah, this will actually have to use import from derivation, which has a import from derivation. It has a nice, hold on. Next manual table. Oh, it's not here anymore. I think it's in unstable or the latest Nix version. Import from derivation. Yeah, that has a page now describing this in the Nix manual. So did we actually see that import from derivation was necessary here? Well, it is necessary because we import Nix packages here, which is a derivation in our case. And that's pretty much exactly the definition of import from derivation. And let's see, what is the hash QAW? I'd say that's exactly the same one we had before with the other ways of patching things. Let me also just check what happens if we remove the patch, or actually let's do it like this. Just import the original one. We don't need that trace here anymore. Yeah, let's just comment this out. Like this. So yeah, that's N1JJ. And we can also try this one again and just verify it's the same. And that is the case. QAW and this one here, Nix packages. QAW, right? Yes. All right. I'll briefly read comments. Could you poke them for reinviting people like Mr. Oh, yes. I mean, maybe a brief explanation of what that means. Reinvite. There's not that Oh, here's this one. So in Nix packages, let me briefly give a bit more context. So we have a lot of package maintainers, and if you want to get requested for a review for those packages that you maintain, you need to be in the organization. So if I pick like a random peer here, try to add like, I don't know, I happen to know that notifications, which is kind of very confusing, but I can't add them here because they're not in the organization. And so there's a kind of useful script that if someone adds themselves to the maintainer list, and we have if you want to be a package maintainer, you need to do that anyways, then it automatically invites you to the organization without any permissions, just read-only member of the organization. Yeah, and so you get an automatic invite, but that expires after like a week. And so sometimes, so yeah, we have this issue here where if you missed it, you can kind of request being added again, and occasionally someone goes in here and like just adds the people that have missed their invites. Hopefully we can automate this a bit more in the future, but it's not a lot of cases, so it's very fine. Right, but yeah, I'll keep this open here so I can look at it later. But yeah, otherwise I think this is good. So you could try running in read-only mode to show that IFT is necessary. Yes, we actually could, and maybe let's do that real briefly still. So read-only mode, read-only dash mode. We won't see it now because it already built the thing, but we could see it if we do it like Nix packages dash patched, make that uppercase. Yeah, we can see it now. Path is not valid. So read-only mode, well, actually read-only mode would be too restricting anyways. We'd have to say allow import from derivation equals false. Does that work? It doesn't quite work. Option allow import from derivation false. Like this? Yeah, that works. So yeah, I cannot build because allow import from derivation is disabled. And that's not the case with the other ones. But yeah, so if we enable this, then it works. Anyways, yeah, let's conclude it here. Thanks for watching, and hope to see you again.